I want to begin with something that happened to me in the summer of 1993. I was invited that summer to be the assistant to the great American philosopher Mortimer Adler during his summer residence at the Aspen Institute. He had been going to Aspen for I think nearly 35 years. He actually founded it, where he held his fabled great book seminars. And being a great bookie myself, he had asked me to come out. He was getting a little older then and wanted somebody to basically take over the seminar when he went to the bathroom. And it was with tremendous pleasure I went out there 3 summers in a row to do that. Now, those of you who've never heard the name Mortimer Adler, I'm sure you've heard of Encyclopedia Britannica, which he edited for many years. You may have heard of the great books of the Western world, which he edited. And in terms of American philosophy, one of the greats that we've ever had. He was also a man who championed the work of St. Thomas Aquinas, even though he was born Jewish and wouldn't become a Christian and then ultimately a Catholic till very late in his life. But that particular summer of '93, I was invited to a cocktail party at the Adler's home in Aspen. And being always on time, and especially excited to be back in Aspen, I arrived first. I walked in the room, I saw Mortimer standing there with another gentleman. I walked up and I said, "Hey, Mortimer," and he turned and he said, "I want you to meet Harry Blackman." And there I was, face to face with the man who wrote Roe versus Wade. And I didn't know what to say. And then Mortimer, knowing where I was coming from and where he was coming from, he said, "Oh, by the way, and Deal is a teacher of philosophy at a Catholic college. He teaches St. Thomas Aquinas. And he's also a convert." And then Blackman's face sort of indicated a recognition of probably who I was and where I was coming from. Before he could say anything, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm one of those guys that disagrees with your Roe decision." And Mortimer very, very diplomatically laughed and changed the subject. And as most cocktail parties, we moved on to other things. However, what I didn't know is that the purpose of the party was to celebrate Justice Blackman's 20th anniversary of his decision, and that I was expected to be a guest of honor at a lecture he was giving in just an hour in the lecture hall at Aspen, that I was going to be seated on the front row as a special guest. So, naturally, the wheels in my mind are spinning, and I go over to the lecture hall, sit in the front row, and it's packed, about 400, 500, mostly women, and they were actually standing in the aisles. And there was no doubt that this was going to be a love fest for Justice Blackman. And he came out on stage and was standing about from me where that table was, and he looked at me in the front row and he smiled. And then he started his speech. And he would only go a few sentences when the place would erupt with applause. A couple of standing O's. And the place was like, it was like he was a rock star. And I was sitting there the whole time, not clapping, just kind of taking it all in. And he looked at me, and then he looked at the audience during about the 5th or 6th interruption. He held up his hand and he said, "Wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen, you have to realize that not everybody in this room would agree with us about Roe." And there was this explosion of booing. And even shouts. I think I heard somebody shout, "Who is it?" And I felt like I was in a Euripidean drama and the Furies had been let loose in the room. And just for a moment, I thought, I'm in danger. Foolishly. But that's how tactile, how strong the the feeling was that was let go in the room at that moment. I think Blackman was regretted a little bit saying anything, because I kind of shrunk down in my chair, and Mortimer was giving me the elbow, like, we're going to find you out. I felt a moment of fear. But anger, in the face of the anger of the pro-abortion community, all of you have seen that, everybody in this room. You've seen it in your conversations with people, you've seen it in your demonstrations, in your meetings, in your radio and TV debates. Everybody in this room has seen the anger. And anger is a sign of weakness. Anger is a sign of people who aren't certain of their position. I very rarely have seen a pro-lifer get angry because they know. And anger doesn't sell. But you know what? When I was thinking about this encounter with Justice Blackman, I remembered a moment a few years earlier that scared me even more in an encounter with a pro-abortionist. I was in my very first year as a college professor in Atlanta at a place called Mercer University, a Baptist school. I still wasn't a Catholic yet. I wouldn't become a Catholic until 1984. I was teaching a course in ethics, and I put abortion on the syllabus. And when the night came around, these were night classes because I was just begging for any kind of job I could get at the time. My other classes were held at the federal and state penitentiaries in Atlanta, which was a wonderful place to learn how to teach. And I had assigned the abortion report to a young woman, mid-30s, with 2 small kids, thinking I would get a sympathetic report. But when she gave her report, she said, I have 2 young children, beautiful children, but the 2 children I had before I aborted, I did it because my husband and I didn't want them, and they wouldn't be happy, and because we loved them. Now, I was 30 years old, and frankly, I had never heard anybody say that they got an abortion because they loved a child. And I thought about the word love. And I thought about the word happiness. And I told you before, I was a great bookie. I'm also a fan of the great ideas. And I realized at that moment that the great ideas had been taken away from us. They had been pulled up by their roots, that they no longer had the meaning that they had in the history of our civilization, so deeply informed by the Greek philosophers, the Roman philosophers, the Jews, and the Christians, that they had come to mean something entirely different. If you could say you killed a child because you loved a child, something was wrong. And that actually led me on a 10-year journey of writing a book on happiness to find out, just what went wrong with these ideas, that they were taken like that and they were distorted and perverted. There is nothing more perverse in nature than for a mother to turn on her child. And I think exactly of the way in which love has been treated in the great literature of the West that would so directly refute the way she talked about the love for her child. And I can't help this. I'm a Shakespeare guy. And I remember what Romeo overheard Juliet say when she came out on her balcony in Verona. She said, and I won't try to affect a woman's voice, "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague." What's Montague? "It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name." What's internet?